Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Carousel in the heart of Marylebone. We're here this morning to put together a round table with our good friends over at Twitter to talk around the world of live. To help us do that, to find some insights and some key trends which will hopefully come out of this discussion, I have a faithful panel of experts. We'll start at the other end. We have Jerry Dakin, who is our director and partner over at Cara. Next to him, we have Rebecca Birchnell, who is Head of Consumer Experience Strategy at PhD. Then we have our friend from Twitter, David Wilding, who is the Director of Planning for UK. And then finally, but by no means least, we have Alex Smith, who is Head of Planning over at Maxis. So team, we're going to discuss live. We've seen a lot of things happening in that live space, and particularly in the live streaming world. Twitter themselves did a partnership with the NFL, which by all accounts, I was doing some research last night and the day before, and it came across very well in all the comments I saw. But how does that work for brands? Are brands starting to go, right, we really want to get involved in that type of experience? That's a kind of audience we want to reach. How have you guys found it out there in the market so far?
I mean, I think Twitter's always had this association with live, and I think brands have always wanted to be a part of that. And to be honest, in the past, that has often led to some slightly awkward things of brands like desperately trying to be part of these live moments and tweeting alongside them and things. So I guess the shift is almost in creating more of an opportunity to be within that content, perhaps literally with kind of adverts that run in the middle of it, or creating their own live experiences. And I think that does excite marketers, and it is something we're getting asked a lot about. It's obviously early days, especially here in the UK, in terms of how many opportunities there are, but people are asking.
I think one of the things that's really interesting for us, and certainly with the Twitter opportunity, is the quality of the live streaming content. So a lot of our clients have been talking about live video for a while. Obviously, Periscope has been around for quite a long time from a live streaming perspective, but they're really looking for the type of quality media that they can get out of it, the quality of viewing. And I think the relationship that Twitter have built with Magic Pony is much, much stronger than some of the more UGC type live content that's available on other platforms at the moment, and that makes it really exciting.
Yeah, and I think from our point of view, brands at the end of the day just want an audience. They just want the quality audience that they might have seen on TV and those sorts of things. So if those light TV viewers are viewing that rich content somewhere else, they just want to be in front of those people. And the fact that we can use the data and leverage Twitter as a platform is really powerful, I think.
And I suppose one of the key things for this, and bringing those, you talk about the audience from TV, I suppose you're opening up to a whole new audience, an audience that might not necessarily have watched the NFL before, but actually uses a platform like Twitter on a regular basis. Is that something that allows brands to, I suppose, become more hyper-personalised when the ads come in? And how is that taking place from a creative perspective, I suppose?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's the challenge that we will probably have going into this, is educating brands that this is a different platform. They can be more niche with their targeting, and they should tailor that creative to the audience that are watching. They can also look at the comments and the interaction with the content and actually tweak pretty much in real time as to what they want to say to that audience in that moment. And I think that that's where the real value is going to come from, those brand relationships with that content.
I think one of the challenges, and I know myself and Jerry agree on this point, is that with brands thinking about not just using a TV ad in live video content, one of the amazing opportunities, as just mentioned, is around being personalised and being more hyper-relevant to what's happening and who's viewing it. But the challenge then comes from a creative perspective, that the experience of live is so rich in terms of the quality of it, that how do you make sure that the content is not a replication of a TV ad, but also isn't as lo-fi as some of branded content that can be available, or you fall into the trap of putting a 3-minute piece of content into the space that sits within a live piece of video. So there are quite a lot of balances as to how you make those decisions and kind of work out how many variants you have for different audiences versus how good the quality is and the production values are.
Yeah, and also think of the platform. Just because it might be the NFL, don't feel that you need to put 30 seconds in front of someone. It is a different screen, it's a different environment. So cut that down. If you can get that message across in 10 seconds or 5 seconds, do the audience a favour and, try and give them something back. I think that will really play into brands' favour.
And is there a part, because we talked briefly about television and actually you're taking a television audience and using that on your mobile with a different platform. How do platforms, that's a good question for you, David, do you collaborate with these television networks, or is it kind of us against them? How does it work?
Oh no, it's kind of hugely collaborative. It's intended to be complementary. So the stream we're taking the NFL from is the CBS TV stream. So you can watch it on TV, or you can watch it on Twitter, either if you're not in front of a TV, or if you want to just have that slightly different experience with tweets and a chance to kind of have your say all in one place. So the way we're thinking of it is that Twitter brings a really unique live experience. Our content partners obviously bring the content, but it's entirely complementary. And what we've seen to date is that a number of people are literally using the product at home. But what it's also doing, importantly for the NFL, is bringing in people who couldn't otherwise have watched the match, who are having that experience on their mobile through Twitter. And they're able, obviously, to then kind of grow their audience too, and also grow it globally, because it's in all markets, apart from Canada, oddly.
Yes, I saw there was some sort of licensing restrictions.
Yes, not my area of expertise, but yes, there's poor Canadians.
Yes.
Everything else is working out for Canada at the moment. So
exactly. I mean, why should they have everything?
Yes. They're not going to have a Trump or a Clinton, so they're okay there. I suppose from that point of view, we touched on the NFL. In terms of other sporting events, particularly in the UK, obviously ones that spring to mind, Premier League football is a good one. I suppose concerts. We talked jokingly about Eurovision Song Contest, but if you think about it, a lot of my friends, or I don't know whether I should admit this or not, I've noticed on their Facebook feeds, not that I've been invited, do have Eurovision parties. So in certain events like that, where people are actually at different venues, on the go at different places, those kind of partnerships are something that I presume a platform like Twitter is looking to develop.
Yes, I mean, we're very open-minded in terms of what content we develop. We're thinking that anything where that live experience kind of comes to life on Twitter can be enhanced by this experience. And typically that's the area of sports, because clearly that plays out live. Politics, as we've seen with the debates, and entertainment, so kind of those live entertainment properties. So they're the areas that we're kind of focusing on. We just announced the Melbourne Cup in Australia is going to be live on the live video product. We're kind of constantly thinking about how we can develop it. But as I say, it's all entirely complementary. And the exciting thing is how much the TV industry are embracing it too.
I mean, if you look at Eurovision in particular, which I always think we should, it's perceived very differently across Europe. But in the UK, it's always had a certain kind of humour to it. Originally, great Terry Wogan bringing that to life. Nowadays, that's in the hands of the viewers. And I think half of the experience for a lot of people nowadays is watching it with Twitter. It is kind of, people tweeting out maps of Europe with Australia plunked into the middle and things like that. And there's always been something great and complimentary about it, but maybe slightly disjointed, that you have a couple of different screens and it doesn't work as well as it could. And I think the fantastic thing about the live product is it's bringing those two things together. So actually, to prepare for this, I got up at 2 a.m. and watched some of the debate last night, the presidential debate. And it really is a rich experience where, you can have kind of the full screen video on your phone, or you turn it back to portrait and you see the tweets live and it's happening, and you feel you can respond, engage, retweet those things without being pulled out of it. And I think that is kind of how it's really bringing a very natural thing together. And I guess things like Eurovision, but any number of things that people want to talk about, are the most obvious place to kind of start.
And I think the way that the specific Twitter platform has been built for live is very intuitive to exactly that point. So you can see that it lives really easily in an Apple TV space, because it does get people to enjoy and join the conversation that's happening around that live space. But you also then have the ability to look at it on mobile, so it can be on the go, or it can be an appointment to view and sat down with a group of friends or family. So it does play into some of those hyper live moments like the debate, but also bigger events like Eurovision, or we've learned from Amplify that some of the festivals that aren't streamed on TV are a really interesting opportunity for brands and for consumers to sit down and enjoy some of that content. So how brilliant would it be if that was in longer form and allowed people to enjoy much more of that sort of live entertainment?
I think what we find quite exciting from a user's perspective is we're not asking them to do anything they weren't already doing, which is have a great live experience on Twitter and be in that moment. All we've done is brought together the screen, the tweets, and the chance to have your say into one place. So the reaction from users has been incredibly positive, because essentially we're just making that experience even better and not asking them to go out their way to change their behaviour.
And I suppose that we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, kind of some of the biggest challenges that brands face. That's one is education, obviously, is trying to teach brands new things is always very difficult when they're set in certain ways. And I suppose another one, when you're looking at new events and teams to kind of partner together and collaborate with, is obviously rights issues become an issue when you're at gigs, when you're at sporting events. Are there any other big challenges that you see? And I suppose that's number one. And then number two is, what do you think will be the big driver of really pushing live as a concept for brands over the next 12 months?
I think, for me, I think it's don't make it live in isolation. Create it as part of a marketing plan, and really involve live within a strategy. I think it's almost like having a party and not sending out any invites. You know, you need to drive people to that event. You need to tell them what's going to go on, what's their requirement. You know, do you want them to get engaged? How do you want them to get engaged? Actually sort of directs the audience a bit more, and I think brands can really play a part in that. I think some brands do it better than others, but this is still quite a new space, and I think there's still a lot to learn.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very open space. I mean, even what we mean by live, it's everything from, like taking the NFL, which is a TV broadcast, and putting it online. It's Periscope, which is kind of individual people, wherever they are. It's, BuzzFeed exploding a watermelon in your Facebook newsfeed. And all of those things are kind of huge possibilities and opportunities. And even people like BuzzFeed churning out all this content haven't really cracked it yet. And it kind of reminds me of some of the early days of Netflix and streaming. And you kind of had that House of Cards moment when suddenly everyone realized, actually, there's better quality content that I can get through this digital streaming than I could get elsewhere, or it's different, or there's something unique about it. And I think it'll be interesting to see how whether it's traditional kind of events or whether it's completely new types of live event, they adapt to not just be the same thing broadcast with tweets next to them, but really to bring that format to life. And that will attract marketers with it.
I think one of the questions we're probably going to get asked by our clients over the next 6 months or so as live kind of expands and explodes in different channels is what it adds to the media plan, what different facets it allows you to play within. So, depending on where that budget's coming from, if it's not incremental on top of a plan already, is it coming out of TV? Is it being drawn out of digital AV? What does that then mean for how it's measured? What is its effectiveness going to be for a brand? I think they're all things that we're starting to scratch the surface of and starting to make some really good recommendations and kind of hypotheses of what it does. But that's going to be crucially important, and I think that will play into how much it costs to buy that media, how that media is then delivered, the audiences that you can scale, the events and things that you can be around. So it's certainly something that, from my perspective, our clients are going to want a lot more information on, and I think we have to find a way to carve out exactly as you were saying. It shouldn't be a standalone part of the plan. It shouldn't be kind of exploratory innovation bit. It is core to how people are consuming AV content, but how do you make it part of that overall plan and make sure that it sings, that it isn't just left to use the same content as everybody else's? It's going to be a big question for us, I think.
And actually, I think that's a very good point. You're absolutely right there. And I think the content piece is quite interesting. How do you create the right type of content for this kind of environment? I suppose that's a question I wanted to ask.
And I think what's interesting there is if you take, say, the TV model, quite a fair amount of TV is live. You think about X Factor, you think about live sport and what have you. The brands in the advertising around that content are not pretty much 99 times out of 100 making live content. They're making content that they think is hopefully compelling for that audience. And I think the opportunity really for brands, the key thing to remember is that you're not, you have to make it live and compelling. And the second part of that is really, really important. And if it's compelling, the actual creative work, the content doesn't necessarily have to be live, albeit it can be, because we have all these tools now that allow people to do live. But I think what we've created is experience for our users, which is compelling. That brings an audience to Alex's point. And the opportunity for brands is to think, what's the right thing for me to do in this space? And as Jerry says, this doesn't necessarily mean a reactive, real-time ad. There are so many kind of compelling ways now that brands can kind of create content for Twitter and obviously elsewhere as well. But I think the opportunity there for all brands to take advantage of that. The key thing is having a very clear strategy as to what they're trying to do.
And I think, just on that point, actually, I think also knowing when not to do it is also important. I think a lot of people see the new shiny thing and chase it, and they think they've got a clear purpose, and then try it once, doesn't work because they don't quite know how to measure it, or they don't know what they want from it, and then you'll never see it again. I think it's such a wasted opportunity. I think having a clear purpose, knowing when's the right time to do it, will really give you those insights you want to then make it sort of success in future. So.
And I think the other thing that's going to be really interesting is as viewing generally increases of live, whether it's on Twitter or in other platforms, it's going to be more and more interesting to understand what devices and what spaces and time that content's being viewed on. So how do you behave slightly differently if you've got a group of people who are spending 45 minutes watching a piece of content and, it's a cluster of a family perhaps, and they're watching it through an Apple TV or an Amazon Fire, versus someone who might be watching snippets of something on mobile as they're traveling, and how do you maybe consider adapting content for those different types of viewing audiences and different types of ways of consuming live?
And do you think it will be those devices itself that will drive that? You know, obviously mobile now is like a remote control for people's lives now, isn't it? Everyone has a mobile phone for everything. Do you think it will be that drive? Because we've been here since, gosh, I think I took over Media Week in 2004, and we were still talking about the year of mobile then, which was 12 years ago, and finally brands are starting to adapt and create mobile campaigns. Do you think it'll be those devices that will really drive live as something that needs to go on those campaign planning tools?
I think my personal opinion will be that, I mean, it probably will be mobile, but I think it also, a lot of it depends on the type of content that's coming through live, when it's being shown. You know, if it's global content like NFL and the debates, I think a lot of it will be mobile. But if you do start to think about primetime live events that might be on a UK channel that are expanded into live, that I think changes things, you know, with the way a lot of people don't have Sky or Virgin anymore, they've got digitally connected TVs. I think a lot of it will play out depending on what relationships commercially are built with Twitter, Facebook and the like, and live.
And actually the live video product that we've created has been designed to fit to the largest available device. So if that's your mobile, that's fine. Or if you want to go to an iPad, a desktop experience obviously gives you a bigger screen. If you can flick it onto Apple TV, you get that very, very kind of immersive experience as well. So we had that in mind. Bex's point about actually, mobile is one way to consume live, but people consume a lot of content on a lot of different devices.
Absolutely. And we talked kind of briefly about brands being educated, understanding how it works, putting it onto their plans. If you look at the NFL, there was a few brands such as Nestle, Sony, Verizon, who kind of leading the way and getting involved in this. Do you think there's any particular sectors, i.e. is it automotive, is it pharma, probably not, that are leading the way in terms of understanding live and really wanted to put it into their plans? You know, the clients that you guys are dealing with on a daily basis, is there one kind of sector that goes, yes, that fits them perfectly, or...
The short answer is no, but the longer answer is I've never asked. Like FMCG is a sector that does often lean into some of these new things. Obviously, do a lot of mass reach TV advertising, and now we're talking about Twitter in a way that kind of ticks those boxes and sounds very familiar to them. And I think they're also an advertiser that knows that their products are quite, some people love them, but a lot of people just buy them on a habit, and they have to do interesting things to stand out. So I think they're pushing that space. Obviously, it's more the clients who want to lean forwards rather than necessarily, I would say, an industry as a whole, from my experience. Yeah. And again, to David's point, it's not necessarily that they need to lean in and do a live advert in the middle of that. It's just, this is creating a new opportunity for reach. The more things change, the more they stay the same. You can think about it in a very traditional TV way. It's bringing out light viewers. It's bringing out an engaged audience who isn't going to skip your ads because they really want to see what happens next. And you can put a fairly traditional TV spot in there. Now, I'm not saying that's the end game or the best possible thing, but that opens up kind of this, live field to a lot of advertisers who would like to play in this field, but are a bit nervous about creating their own thing or doing anything really radical. And hopefully, in time, we'll see some more interesting uses of it with data and targeting and perhaps, live adverts, but you don't have to start there.
I think for us it's less about a category or a sector, and it's more about the audiences. So understanding the type of people who are adopting live first, what those audiences look like, and then actually our clients who play more in that space. So what it does do is open up nice opportunities for, as Jerry was saying, lighter TV viewers, younger audiences. I think as it progresses naturally over time, it will start to broaden to many more categories. And you can see things like NFL and debates being really resonant with the automotive categories, and as an example. It'll just be a case of seeing how things, for us certainly, evolve over time and which different sectors and audiences really adopt that technology.
And I suppose another great thing to come out of is the creativity angle for it. If you're creating different ads for different formats for different things, this obviously opens up from an agency perspective. It gives you the opportunity to become even more innovative with your clients.
You'd like to think so. For me, that question probably, for me, the biggest shambles in the industry at the moment is that we've moved a lot of media to some of these mobile spaces, and we haven't moved our creative direction as much as we'd like to. Even just, with a traditional video auto-playing in the Twitter newsfeed or the Facebook newsfeed, the fact that people are scrolling through that video quite quickly, only watching a few seconds. And yes, we want to plan some media there, but if we're sticking a 30-second TV ad where the brand is revealed in a great flourish at the very end of it, it's kind of a waste of our money. So yeah, it should be really, really exciting, innovative opportunities. I'd love to see us doing some of the basics consistently across the board as well, to be honest.
I think it'll really challenge a lot of creatives to think about what the experience people are having on mobile even more than they do now. So some of the native formats that exist in things like Snapchat, Twitter and Facebook have really challenged a lot of creative teams to think differently. But I think vertical video, live video will make them think even more about the size of the screen, the length of time that they've got captured attention for, and how to really play as well as they can. Because a lot, as Jerry was saying, still historically think that people are sitting down watching a full 30-second ad in Coronation Street and playing all the way from second 1 to second 30 on that, and that does need to start to change.
I'm optimistic in this space. The problem that Jerry and Bex talks about is absolutely there, but I think the sense we're getting is that we're seeing progress in this area over the last kind of 9 months or so from creative agencies in particular. They're hungry to understand how to make their content work best on Twitter, but clearly that takes a little bit of time to kind of go down the chain. So yeah, I think the problem is a very real one. We're all very mindful of it. But I'm optimistic about our kind of creative community, be that in media agencies, be that in advertising agencies, or be that even kind of creators kind of working with brands to create their own content. That people, it's not actually that hard, this stuff. It's just thinking about what is the context in which somebody's going to be seeing this message, and how do we best adapt what we've got to say to that.
Yeah, and also, I suppose from my point of view and from our agency's point of view, it's how do we get the media agency involved earlier in the process? I think we can plan for these moments far further ahead than we actually are. So when you are filming those big TV ads, how do we leverage those economies of scale and start to produce this other content so that we can actually make it live in the right environment?
I think David's optimism is absolutely right as well, because I think what we often forget, being from the media side of things, is that the support is absolutely there from Twitter's creative teams. They are so willing and able to get involved in helping people shape the right creative, that I think we mustn't forget that there are people who live in these platforms day in, day out, that can really give clear guidance on what should be being built and how to make those adaptations, as you say.
Yeah, and in terms of the adaptations and the shoot, I found this really awesome thing at the weekend that BBC journalists now have this iPhone app, which just has a vertical yellow box in the middle. And because iPhone is or Android, whatever device you'd like to use, is high enough quality for a lot of what they want to film, journalists on the go are doing that, but they're constantly being reminded that this might get shown in a vertical format where only the middle crop of your video is being shown, and that's live and in real time. And we just have to challenge ourselves and challenge the creative briefs we're writing and how we're working. If you're going to do a traditional storyboard, let's also show what a vertical slice that would look like. Let's also ask ourselves what happens in the first 3 seconds. And then kind of like that, you've turned a shoot for just a TV ad into a shoot for most of the content you start to need.
And does that drive come from the agencies and also from the media owners? Does it come as a collaborative approach? I mean, just to make sure that you are, when you are pitching, you are showing how it looks in different formats. Is that something that's starting to happen, or are we still kind of a bit behind the scale?
I think more and more we're having to do that, because otherwise, obviously there are always going to be the good ones out there, but more and more, we're having to do that and drive that, because otherwise we will just get a TV ad sort of a week before it's due to go live, and then, we're scrambling around trying to find the assets retrospectively, trying to make them fit the formats and things like that, and that's definitely the way that we want to avoid working. So I think, the more we can drive that earlier on and drive that change, I think, and leverage, sort of media owners and Twitter and people like that to actually help us. I think that's definitely helpful.
And right up front to the client brief, and I wasn't a client that long ago myself, so I suppose I can challenge everyone.
Was he a nice client?
Was I a bad client? Yeah.
Was he good? He was okay?
Yeah.
I can't imagine
it's just if the brief that you give to your creative agency is make me a TV ad, and then once that's made, you then say, oh, by the way, I'd like to cut this up and do something different with it. Well, of course they make you a TV ad. So it's the tiniest of changes. Yes. And you hear, I think maybe it's Unilever or someone who says, I want to see all your creative shown on a mobile, simple things like that. Would start right from the brand. But partners like Twitter are going in, they're educating, they're continually, and I think everyone needs to keep saying these things, and we all have a bit of responsibility.
I think we're quite lucky with a couple of our clients at the moment who are making those briefs to creative agencies, not for a TV ad, for content, to be ready for digital first. They're asking those exact same questions. What does this look like on mobile first? If this is where our audience are predominantly, how are you building for that, not giving us a 30-second script? So we are starting to see that shift happening in various different areas, and I think that's really exciting. I think people who find it quite challenging will hopefully find it challenging for the right reasons, and not because they don't get to have that shiny piece of TV content that they want to make.
Absolutely. And I suppose kind of flipping that on its head from a brand perspective, for them it's kind of about knowing, actually this is going to give me some sort of return on investment. How do we, how do we measure live, David? What's the kind of the key crux?
It's a really good question, and the answer is we kind of measure it however the client wants to measure it. And I think the kind of new era that we're in, where we're kind of in that kind of post-social media age of just we have now a very kind of compelling live video platform. We are having the conversations we're having with clients are changing from what is my cost per engagement, how many likes did I get, etc., into has this worked for my brand? So the short answer is, if you're measuring it through measuring offline sales impact or through a econometric model, we want to help you to do that. If it's about brand effects, brand awareness, we can do that as well. It's a kind of a horses for courses approach, but I think what we do with brands is we basically ask them to, when they're working with Twitter, to kind of complete the sentence, how can we X so that Y? And the Y is, what is your objective, what are you trying to achieve? And the X is, what is your approach to using Twitter? And because there are so many different options now available to brands, it's not just the kind of witty 140 character tweet. Brands' eyes are being opened up to all the kind of creative possibilities that there are.
And that's a great thing, because I think once they understand that, they get the drive in from that end into you guys, and then back out again, which is certainly the way forward. So we kind of talked around those things. What do you think is the biggest hamper to live taking off over the next 12 months? What do we need to overcome? What are the biggest obstacles we need to overcome over the next year?
Well, one thing for me, especially the Twitter platform, this entire conversation we've had for the last 30 minutes or 5 minutes if it's edited down, would sound incredibly alien to some people. Some people are like, Twitter's that platform for 140 characters, and I think you can put a picture on there, can't you? So that the entire fact that we've managed to spend all this time talking about the nuances of like live video content on the platform is a pretty big barrier to get over. A fairly easy one to get over once someone picks up their phone, sees a bit of live content and kind of gets that aha moment. I think that is the starting point of really just, the platform has shifted hugely over the last 12 months, 6 months. And people first of all need to say, oh, okay, it's quite a different space. That's kind of the first step.
I think it's surfacing the content, it's making it easily accessible, and it's making people find it. I mean, you'll probably find that there's people that, say for instance, have been on Facebook and still can't find a live stream, So I think one of the challenges is trying to sort of surface that, make people use it, drive an audience, and that would generate the brand's interest, because they'll start seeing it and they'll start using it and they'll start being asked questions about it. And I think that will really sort of make everyone's job a little bit easier, because, there'll be a natural conversation around those scheduled programmings that people will go back and watch again and again, but on Twitter as opposed to sort of on a traditional TV. So.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing for us is understanding kind of the vision of the scalability and how those events are going to roll out. So it's, at the moment, some of the challenges will be around the content not being right for a brand, or the opportunity not being quite there. So is it too global? Is it less local? Does it not have the scale in our individual market? So I think it'll be really interesting for us to see over the next 6 months or so how UK properties, or properties from the US that transport over here that really resonate very well with the UK audience, can offer us that scale for clients who are wanting to operate just in the single market.
Actually, it's a question I was going to ask next. It's twice you've stolen my questions. I love that. How do you? One of the things is you've seen the notes. To be fair, I haven't actually asked one of the questions on here yet. David must be turning inside. I sent the questions to him yesterday, thinking, crikey, we haven't got through one of those 27 you sent me yesterday. But you've given me so many good answers, and we've got such great content. But I was going to ask about that. Actually going global, a platform such as Twitter gives you that opportunity to automatically go global. I suppose for me, how important is it there are nuances obviously in different markets, but is it a case of on digital platforms now, do you have one piece of content that works globally, or do you still have different types of content for the different audiences, and how does that affect live if it is an event such as the NFL or it is Premier League football, which goes everywhere?
I mean, honestly, there's no simple answer again, but I think I've found a perception in local markets, so I work in a global world, a perception in local market that things have to be made there, they have to be perfectly tailored to that audience. And I think a lot of really great content that kind of taps into kind of human truths and, something like a Dove sketches or something like that, you don't need to remake that with kind of people who happen to be filmed in front of a street in your hometown. Yeah. So I think it varies a lot. That said, it's very easy in like a global team to like say, this creative and this insight works perfectly well, and it's hard to underestimate the differences in audiences and things between like Saudi Arabia and the US. So it's going to require a bit of sense. And I think one of the great things about digital is you can often test that. So you can take a bit of content, you can show it to just a few thousand people in a market, you can do like a brand lift, you can do some research around it, and you can see, is this working, is this not working, do I need to adapt it more to this market? And I think it's a learning experience along that journey.
I think I was at an event in the weekend with some clients, and actually the conversation that kept coming up there was this battle for efficiency. This concern that actually, if I've got to make a piece of content for every platform that's slightly different, and if I've got to do that in 100 different markets, so that, you know, Belgium's different to Burundi or whatever it may be, that's an awful lot of stuff, and that's not an efficient model from my perspective, from their perspective. So I totally have a lot of sympathy for that, but I think the solution there is to find out how much kind of nuanced context is enough. That might come from the platform, and often does. It might come from the market, to Jerry's point. But at the same event, somebody put a video on of, and I'm going to show my age here, it was like pineapple pen. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
I literally hadn't seen it. Went home, and the kids were like, yeah, it's been all over school for 3 weeks. And it was, but literally, people from all over the globe at this event, and every single person was like totally engaged by it. So it shows that you can get that thing right if you kind of come up with that great idea. And I don't think ideas become less important. I think they become more so.
I think it's also about, to Jerry's point, having the foresight of knowing whether a piece of content or a strategy has to travel into different markets. Too often what tends to happen is that a market will do something very well, which will work well, and then it will be asked if it can be exploited into other markets, and that's when you get the challenges and the pushback that maybe the nuances aren't right in this market. So if it's planned for in advance and you can understand the insights and what does universally ties everybody together, then it can work quite well. But the flexibility of something like Twitter or a Facebook is that you don't have to do either. You can just optimize a few markets at a time. You can do everything globally. You can do a single market. You can learn as you go. It doesn't have to be that you book a full month's campaign and then at the end of the month realize that maybe 50% of the media spend was inefficient because the story was wrong. So I think that level of flexibility is not really like we've seen before in such a live environment.
And do you think, adding that in there, do you think there's going to be a genuine shift now from budgets? We'll see more and more being pushed into live, because obviously it transcends all that, makes connecting with the global world a lot easier. The whole live piece is at different audiences at different times. Do you think more, we touched briefly on budgets and brands and where they're placing their spend. Do you think we'll see more and more coming this way over the next couple of years?
I think so. I mean, I think a lot of it depends on how the clients work and how many clients do work at a global level. So the client that Jerry works on is very global. I have a lot of very local clients, and they work very independently from the rest of their markets. But there is generally a shift for a lot of clients anyway to run their businesses at a global central level. So I think it'll be a lot as how that evolves, and then how that evolves in terms of media spend distribution.
I think it does seem to be a fix to some of the challenges facing digital media at the moment, like the complexity of millions of different formats and things. And if you have a fairly consistent live product that you can run, great. And even things around, the worries about ad blocking or people skipping ads and all some of that conversation in the industry. If someone is paying full attention to a live stream, your ad is in there, and it's, not so boring and so long that they have time to go make a cup of tea, but, just an instant part of it. You can be pretty sure they're going to watch that. And I think that is a reassuring thing at a time when, we are asking some tough questions about that on some other formats and some other platforms.
And I think, going back to Jerry's earlier point, I mean, yes, it would be brilliant if we can leverage efficiencies, sort of across the plan, but ultimately we can A/B test so quickly now and across different markets with different creatives. So, let's use those tools and let's analyse the results, see what works, see what didn't work, and use it as a moving sort of a test and learn process throughout, rather than just doing it once, discounting it because maybe it didn't work that time. So
it's kind of about longevity as well. I think that's the key. And I think what excites me is the fact that you have this kind of live environment, and not only does it kind of help drive creativity by making people think slightly more innovatively, which is always good. You cross all these audiences. It brings together different parts, and also the data thing I think is really key. You talk about having the right ads for the right people. This I think now allows you to have the right ads at the right time, and I think that will be something that will be really interesting. So in terms of where live goes, what's kind of next, David, in terms of the?
I think more of what we're doing. We've obviously just started out on the live video journey. We're thinking about, as I mentioned earlier, what content is going to be kind of most compelling for that. And I think we are also thinking about discoverability and how we make it easy for users to find that live content. So to Alex's point earlier, it's one thing to have it, but you have to invite people to the party. And also we're thinking about the experience they get when they're actually using the product. So the tweets they're getting in their timeline. Actually, we've done some very interesting analysis about the different types of tweet, putting them into different categories, and basically ensuring that there's a nice balance of those tweets, not in terms of sentiment, but in terms of the type of kind of construct that they are. So we're thinking about all of that, and more broadly what we're doing is we're just offering up more and more video products for brands to kind of connect with this very kind of influential audience that we've got. So we're very, very excited about kind of the future and where all that goes. We, as Jerry said, need to kind of overcome this perception that it's your kind of reactive kind of go-to place for organic daily content, and just help brands and help agencies to kind of really see the potential that's there.
Yeah, because if there is one thing which is the opposite of longevity and really burns marketers out, it's that sense that to do live and to be part of these spaces, you have to be in a room with your legal team and your creatives and creating everything in the moment. And of course, there are examples when that's paid off and worked well. There are far, far more examples where that's disappeared without a trace and no one's noticed it, especially if people haven't put media behind it and backed it. And I think live is a place, especially with some of this creative, when you know broadly what's going to happen, you know kind of what's going to happen in an NFL game. You could make your ads seem quite live and reactive to that experience and have them in the can weeks beforehand. Or, they don't even have to reflect exactly what's happening in that experience, as long as they're kind of relevant to the audience and the people who are going to be watching it. So yeah, definitely don't get caught up on having to do like a war room. Those are real like exceptional one-off kind of things.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that's the beauty of something like this, where you've got that opportunity to plan in advance. You don't want you guys to go great so quickly. That's the key, isn't it? But is there, if you had to look at, and we had a bit of fun earlier before we sat down, if there was one particular live event, obviously Jerry, we know yours is Eurovision. Only joking. It could be.
No, it is.
You could have another one if you had to choose. It really is. If you had to choose one other event, it could be global, it could be UK, that you would really love to see put into this environment and utilise basically from a personal and a brand, a client perspective, if you like. What would it be? I'll start with you, Jerry.
Well, you've stolen my good. I don't know. For me, it's back to the point I made about House of Cards. I think it'll be interesting to see what formats and ideas and things come out of this that isn't an existing event, or it's an existing event that isn't covered on TV, mainstream, like Bex was saying earlier. In some ways, I think, there obviously is value and use in like mirroring what's on TV. But I think, in a couple of years' time, we'll look back on this and there'll be show formats and ideas, and maybe they won't be a 60-minute show. Maybe it'll be like a 10-minute live show that's really interactive and really interesting. And for me, that's very exciting, very interesting. I'd probably be more interested in watching something like that. Still people are going to watch a lot of stuff on telly. So you have to think about what's different, what's unique. And thus, just like the people in the debate last night, I have not answered your question.
That's good. A very political answer. I like that. Rebecca, what about yourself?
I think for me, it would be around that whole sort of live music festival space. I think, we know how many people tune in and watch Glastonbury on the BBC every year.
Yes.
There are so many wonderful live events that only 20,000, 100,000, 150,000 people get to go to, that it almost seems that they're prime and they're ready to be surfaced for a mass market. And they've got intrigue, they've got talent in abundance, they've got multiple different reasons for people to tune in, whether it's Madonna as a headliner on one or Radiohead on the other side. So I think those sorts of things for me are very interesting, and they're not big Eurovision-y type events. There's lots of them, there's lots of frequency in them, and there's lots of variety in them in terms of the different reasons people would tune in.
I think, so I mentioned earlier, sport, politics, entertainment. I think live entertainment is a really interesting area. And you can all think of the shows that are on live as entertainment. And that's not to say that it's our kind of policy to go after those, make that clear. But I think what's interesting is the point about how potentially a new format could spring up out of this. Because if you were hosting a live entertainment format and you had the tweets and you could respond to what was happening on the tweets in the show, and then it could all come around again, that's potentially quite interesting. And I think a number of kind of content creators, TV production companies have tried that with some success with TV and Twitter. Bringing everything into one feed could be even more interesting in that space.
I remember the Prometheus ad. That was my still one of my favourite ones. I did enjoy that.
But even things like I think it was what was that show? Celeb Juice did a live show, and that was all about Twitter. I mean, literally the whole thing was. I think Keith Lemon mentioned Twitter 30 times. And Holly Willoughby did a selfie that she posted on Twitter, and then said that if enough people liked it or retweeted it, she would then do something on the show. So that was all, literally, they were having their phones out watching what was going on. And that sort of content in that live feed environment could be really compelling.
Absolutely. And Alex?
So from a personal one, I'd love to see more niche sports, so British athletics, things like that. I find it really frustrating that it's only once or twice a year that these big events get posted on TV. So it'd be really nice to see a lot more of that playing into those sort of almost mass niche audiences on Twitter. And then also I think something like Secret Cinema, or some of those sort of other, almost to the festival point, those sort of outdoor cinema events, it might be quite nice to sort of really sort of generate a bit more noise around that and get sort of more of a community around that can't actually attend at the time.
Some good ideas in there, I think. David's mentally making notes there, which is great. I suppose one other point I wanted to pick up on, which kind of Jerry alluded to earlier, was the Netflix point and the House of Cards point. I suppose, David, from a Twitter perspective, is there potentially, not this year, not next year, but maybe in years to come, an opportunity for Twitter to create its own live events and its own content in that sense?
Yeah, you think about blanket to blank, can't you?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
No,
you got X and blank Y earlier, so you know.
You have to follow David on Twitter to find out what that's about.
I can't believe I just plugged blank to blank, which is played on Twitter every Friday morning. Do tune in tomorrow.
It's a very good show.
Potentially, it's certainly not something we're thinking about now.
Okay.
But yeah, you 2-3 years down the line, you wouldn't rule it out, but it's not the priority at the moment. We're working with content partners in a whole number of areas without doing it ourselves. So.
But as I said earlier, I think it's a very exciting field, and I think from an industry perspective, it's certainly going to help drive brands into more forward-thinking, creatives into thinking more innovatively, and hopefully help push the industry into the right place over the next couple of years. So thank you very much, panel.
Thanks for having us.
A round of applause
Thanks for the
for
pastries.
Jerry, Rebecca, David, and Alex. I'll do it myself. Yeah. There we go.